Back in 2017, I was one of those quiet souls tending to those seeking help at a psychiatric hospital, a place where the walls seemed to even sigh with every step you took. I was a mental health worker, and my days were stitched together with routine, none more sacred than the Q15 safety rounds. Every 15 minutes, we'd glide through the wards, eyes sharp, hearts steady, checking that no one had slipped a noose around their despair or turned their fists on someone else or something. It was our job to keep the fragile peace, to make sure the patients, and us, the staff, made it through the night unbroken. Most nights I worked my core unit. That's what we called it anyway. The ward that felt like home, where you knew the creak of every bed frame, the way the light slanted through the blinds, and the soft snores of the familiar faces that you'd came to care for, even if you'd never say it out loud. But that night they sent me floating. Floating. It's when they pull you from your safe little nest and drop you into another unit, a stranger's territory, where the air tastes different and the shadows don't quite line up right. I didn't mind. Well, usually. A change of pace could be a bit of a mercy sometimes, but this night wasn't as merciful as I'd hope. It was deep into the witching hours, maybe 2 a.m., when the hospitals felt like a held breath. I was on rounds, my flashlight a dim wand in my hand, moving from door to door. Each door to the units had a small window, a peephole into the dark where 3 patients slept, or tried to, in every room. Normally, I'd nudge the door open, slow and soft, so the hinges wouldn't scream and wake them. You don't disturb the sleeping here. It's really unkind, and some of them carried ghosts in their heads. PTSD, the kind that turns a sudden light into a bomb blast. But this time I stopped short. I flicked my flashlight through the window instead, aiming it at the far wall, away from their faces. I didn't want to be the one to rip them from whatever piece they'd clawed out of the night. The beam hit the wall though, and there it was, a silhouette, stark and wrong, standing between the beds. My stomach twisted. 3 beds, 3 bodies, all accounted for, but this was a 4th, a shape that shouldn't be. It loomed there, tall and still, like it had been waiting for me to look. In that brief moment, time felt as though it stood still. I thought quickly, maybe a patient from the next room slipped through the bathroom that joined them or something, a common enough trespass in a place like this. The rooms were paired, stitched together by the small restrooms where people shuffled in the dark. I mean, I'd seen it before. Sleepwalkers, wanderers, lost souls chasing shadows of their own. I eased the door open, quiet as a prayer, and stepped inside. The air was cold, heavy with the sour tang of sleep and something older, something that clung to the back of your throat. 3 patients lay there, chests rising and falling, soft and steady, lost in their dreams or their drugs. But the 4th? Gone. Vanished like smoke. I swung my light around and nothing. Just the beds, the blankets, the faint hum of the hospital's pulse. The bathroom door was right there, so I crept over, heart hammering, and pushed it open. Empty. No patient, no hiding spot. And then it hit me. This room didn't connect. No access to another patient room on the other side. Just a lone, dead-end box of plaster and silence. Which means that whatever I had seen had been here, standing like a sentinel, and now suddenly it wasn't. I did a double take and checked the patients again, counting breaths like a lifeline. Rise, and fall. All 3 safe, all 3 real. My hands shook as I backed out, shutting the door with a click that felt too loud. I tore through the unit, counting every head against the roster, desperate for an answer. Every patient was where they should be, though, tucked in or pacing their own little worlds. No extras, no escapees. Just the number that we'd started with. But I had seen it. A shadow, whole and solid, draped in what looked like a long coat, its edges sharp as a blade against the dimness. Back at the nurse's station, I spilled it all to the others. A woman with kind eyes and a voice like warm gravel, someone who'd been here long enough to wear the place like a second skin. She didn't flinch. "Yeah, I've seen things too," she said, soft as a secret. She told me about the half-ghost that she'd caught once, a torso and head floating above a bed like a balloon cut loose. No legs, no sense to it. I told her that mine was different, full-bodied, grounded, a figure in a coat that didn't drift but stood, watching and waiting. What was it? I could never pin it down. And really, that's what gnawed at me. My mind spun, chasing itself in circles. A ghost, maybe? Some poor soul who had never left, trapped in these walls that reeked of bleach and misery. I mean, this place was ancient, soaked in decades of pain, patients strapped down, minds shattered, lives snuffed out even. Or was it something else? A residual, a memory burned into the air, replaying like a film strip stuck on a single frame. But I'd seen it, clear as the goosebumps on my arms, but it slipped through every explanation that I could grab. I wanted to believe that it was just my eyes playing tricks, the late hour of twisting shadows into monsters. But deep down, I knew better. It had been there, real as the heartbeat in my chest, and it left me with a chill that I couldn't shake, and a strange, quiet ache for whatever it was that lingered, unseen, in the dark. I, female and 23, have been at my job for over a year now, or close to 2 even. When I first started, everything felt genuinely safe, and I never felt anything weird as in ghostly or anything of the sort. I do work the grave shift, as some call it. The first time me and a coworker got spooked, it was just me and her in the building, and we clearly heard a door slam. And this isn't any normal door, too. It's a huge, heavy metal door. We possibly thought that maybe an officer had gone into the area, and since our cameras weren't working, we ran to the window that we have to see if anyone ever came out of the hallway, but no one ever did. We shrugged it off, but that night we both stayed together in the same room until the officers came back into the building, closer to the shift change. Some months later, I needed to go and retrieve some items from the evidence room, and I think that's when things really started to amp up a bit. So I walked in and the room had 2 dim lights in it. They lit it up enough to see where you were in the room, but definitely wasn't full light. Being the curious person that I am, I started to look around. Being relatively new, I never really went into the evidence for anything, and curiosity got the better of me, I guess. But they had this large glass display on the wall that showed crime scene photos taken, and it had enough things in it that I wanted to see that I pulled out my phone, turned on my light, and started shining it in the case to see the rest of the photos. Honestly, too, I was pretty amazed by it. But knowing that I needed to get back to work, I walked out with the items, but when I went back to return the items, I felt what you would describe as fear, or just genuinely feeling anxious about being back in there for some reason. It was just a weird, spooky feeling, and I didn't think too much of it, but in the next months, I would sometimes hear people talking in the offices that I knew for a fact that were unoccupied, or I would sort of catch a glimpse of a dark figure or what I thought was a coworker in the middle of the hallway, and immediately look, and there was never anyone there. In fact, it happened multiple times in the 1.5 years that I had been here. Until one night, when it really picked up. My shift had just begun, and I had sat down to settle in, and a coworker goes, "Who the heck is that?" And another stated, "Close the door." I was like, "What?" And they told me that we just saw someone with long hair go in there. And I was like, "Well, go and check." I mean, he was the officer, after all, who was armed. And he said, well, if she needs help, she can call us over the radio. Since there was another person in that room, they had clearly seen this person or thing walk into it. It was left at that, and everyone eventually dispersed from the area that we were in. As the previous shift left, it was only me and a few other co-workers left in the building that would eventually need to leave the building for whatever calls and whatnot. And well, at about 3 a.m. I decided to switch the lights off as my head was starting to hurt a little bit, and I sat back down, and that's when I heard what I know to be the main door entrance. My eyes darted to the screen that shows all of our cameras, and I didn't see anyone in the lobby or go into our restroom, but I thought surely if they did go into the restroom, I would hear the toilet flush, or at least I'll see them. I waited, and no one ever came out. I then thought that maybe I was just spooking myself out. But then I heard a door slam in the area behind mine. Again, it's a very large metal door that needs to be slammed to be closed, and they don't just open or close with the draft from the AC or anything. My co-worker, who would usually be in that area, had gone home an hour earlier, and all officers were on the streets on a call. I tried to brush it off by just looking at my phone and computer screens, but I just couldn't shake the feeling of someone or something staring at me. I finally got the courage to stand up and turn the lights on, and I found 2 cabinets in our kitchen that I know were closed, wide open now. I immediately sat down because I just didn't know what to do. I wanted to take my mind off of spooking myself, but really nothing was working at this stage. I began monitoring again, and that was when I felt it. Like the hair behind my ear was being pulled lightly. I could feel and sense someone was sitting on the chair behind me, staring at me too, and I could hear a very specific crunch sound the wall made when somebody sat in that chair and twisted it. It was like a very, very slow turn almost. Eventually, I knew my shift was almost over, and I got enough courage to go into the kitchen and close the cabinets, and when I walked over, I swear to you that the cabinets, they were now closed. I had 20 minutes left on my shift, and in those 20 minutes, I had an officer stand with me in the doorway the whole time because I was absolutely terrified now. I took the next week off, and I didn't see or hear anything after that. Maybe it was the ghost's way of telling me to use my vacation time, or maybe it was just the stress of the job or something. I don't know. Either way, I still tell my co-workers that this place is haunted, and occasionally I'll still get the feeling of being watched in different areas of the building. So I'm located in Akron, Ohio, in the US. This happened in maybe 2022 or 2023. I cannot exactly remember the year. I had just gotten home though from working late one night. I used to test gas stations and would work late into the night most times. I got home at around 2:45 to 3 a.m. and let my dogs out to go potty. And when I was standing out there, I got the overwhelming sensation to peek around the corner of my house towards my neighbors. So I just barely peeked around the side of my house and looked into their backyard, and saw something that truly freaked me out, like the worst feeling that I've ever experienced to date. For context, it was late into the night and it was a dark night that night. Maybe a crescent moon or even a new moon, but either way it was very dark outside. I had stepped back out with my dogs to get my stuff out of my work truck, and while they did their business, I set my stuff inside the side door of my house and walked back outside to see them. After they finished up, I let them back inside, but before I could follow them, I got such an overwhelming feeling that I had to look around that corner of my house to my neighbors, and I didn't know why, but I just felt compelled to do it, so I just barely peeked my head around and saw this creature standing inside of my neighbor's fenced-in backyard. It was standing at the back of the yard facing towards the woods behind our houses, so it had its back towards my neighbor's house and I was looking at its side profile. It stood maybe 6 to 7 feet tall, pale white skin, but was like bright like a light was shining on it. But again, it was pitch black outside. I could see it perfectly though, like I'd shined a flashlight on it. It was very human-like, except it had no clothes on and was muscular but smooth. And while it's a bit of an inappropriate description, I could see it from head to toe, and it had no genitalia, just a smooth body, bright pale skin, and was just standing there, staring into the woods. As I was staring at this, just in absolute disbelief and shock at what I was seeing, while still hiding behind my house essentially, it suddenly snapped its head towards me and stared directly at me. And at that stage, I didn't have any other thoughts in my head apart from run. In a full panic, I ran inside of my house, slammed the door behind me and locked it, just waiting for whatever this creature was to come and get me. I have never felt fear like I did in that moment. I truly thought it was going to come and get me and take me or kill me or something. But thankfully, I didn't see it again, and I've never seen anything like that before or since then. So, in summary, it was 6 to 7 feet tall, bright pale white skin, muscular but smooth body, completely naked but no clear genitalia. It stood staring into the woods inside the fenced-in backyard at the edge of the yard fence. Didn't make any movements besides to snap its face towards me. And the closest thing that I can find online to what it reminds me of is the creature from Prometheus. But it's still not the same at all. So, if anyone has any ideas or thoughts, then I am really all ears. I would love to know what this was, or even have a theory as to what it may have been. I have been hesitant to share this, but now that I'm out of there, I really want to share these 3 experiences with all of you, and have you decide if it was really paranormal or maybe something else. I was playing Minecraft one day on my Xbox 360, playing on the tutorial map trying to get a grasp on console Minecraft, as I'd always been a mobile player. Anyway, as I popped into my first world and went cave exploring, I heard a scream from my parents' room. All I remember is asking my little brother what happened, and apparently a Mexican doll that we had had for who knows how long, honestly. It was in the case that it was in moved slightly, like you couldn't tell from ahead but from the side that it was obvious that it just wasn't straight anymore. It was a subtle thing, but it was definitely weird. The second incident was my family was visiting during this time, and I had to give up my room for the family member that was staying there. But I was given the small room that has a ladder that comes down and leads into the attic into a makeshift bedroom for myself. Context for the room too is that this room has always been cold. It doesn't matter what season it is either. It's just always cold. Anyway, while I was in my room, the suitcases that were kept in there, stacked nicely on top of each other, suddenly fell over. But here's the weird thing. It wasn't on me, but to the side of me, if that makes sense. Like, it should have fallen on me, but for some weird reason it didn't. On another occasion, I'm a bit of an introvert, so I don't get out much even when I'm visiting family in a different city. I don't party or go out or anything like that. And that night was like any other when I heard something that sounded like my name being called. The sound got closer and closer until I could definitely make out that somebody was calling my name. I looked all around, but I never could find out who it was, and in the end I called my parents crying, and I heard some noises in the house too that really terrified me, but I couldn't find anyone that was in there. On another occasion late one night, I don't remember when this actually happened, but I saw a man, or what I thought was a man, by the window. I only saw them for a moment and then they were gone, but I was certain that I saw someone out there, and I looked around again, but I never could find anyone. The following is a real account of our experience in the rural coffee region of Colombia over the last several months. This all began in January, and it has taken us until very recently to uncover the full extent of the localized version of the legends surrounding La Llorona and piece together the experiences that we've been having. And, needless to say, we are thoroughly freaked out now. We had just moved into our house, a secluded finca tucked into the hills near Rio Espejo, where the trees drip mist and the river never sleeps. It was the kind of place that you imagine is peaceful, fertile, a place to start again, I guess. My partner was 4 months pregnant, and we were really excited but also very cautious, still adjusting to the rhythms of the land and the quiet. It all started, though, in the very first week. Late at night, while we slept upstairs, her mother, brother, and sister, who were staying with us at the time, began to hear something. A voice. A woman's voice, faint but urgent, floating in from just beyond the house. What they heard was, "Help me." It didn't come every night, but it came enough, and first once, then again, and by the second week they had heard it 3 times, always around midnight to 3 a.m., always when the night was heavy with fog and the river hummed louder than usual. They said that it wasn't a scream, it wasn't loud, it was worse than that really. It was soft, pained, and human. At first, they thought that it was my partner calling for help from upstairs. After assuring them that it wasn't her, they would look outside, thinking that maybe someone was lost, maybe even hurt. But there was just never anyone there. The trees stood still, the night kept breathing, the voice suddenly faded away. Then came the second week. That night, my partner began to have sudden severe pain, cramping that felt like contractions. We were terrified. It was far too early for labor, and we really didn't know what to do. We were upstairs, focused completely on her, and for reasons that I still cannot explain, we didn't have our phones with us, and they were downstairs, forgotten in the rush of the fear, I guess. Honestly, too, we thought that we had ridden it out for the most part, because by morning the pain had eased and we were exhausted but relieved. Until we spoke to the security guard at the front gate of our residential. He asked us what had happened the night before, and we said nothing. Why? And he told us that an ambulance came to your house at around 1 a.m. Apparently someone called from here, from your property, said that there was a woman in distress. But we hadn't called. No one in the house had. And yet the ambulance arrived, lights flashing, knocking at the gate, and because we didn't answer his call, the security guard refused to let them enter. After waiting, they turned around and left, confused apparently. We were pretty stunned by this, to be honest. That same night, the voice had been heard again by her family, closer this time too, almost under the window in fact. Again, "Help me." It wasn't until we started asking around recently, neighbors, guards, even the older people in the nearby town, that we began to understand and put all the pieces together. We were told very plainly, in fact, that that's La Llorona. You live near the river now. Pregnant women, crying children, and pain draw her in like blood in the water. But what's the most terrifying to us is that here in this part where we live, especially in this town, the stories go deeper. She doesn't just cry by rivers anymore, apparently. She doesn't just appear in white veils either. They say that she has learned how to use the modern world, allegedly. There are stories of phones ringing and no one on the other end but weeping, baby monitors catching whispers, emergency services receiving calls from homes where no one made them, and just like us, ambulances showing up to rural houses in the night, responding to a cry for help that no human ever gave. Some people believe that she's not just a spirit anymore. She's a pattern, a force that clings to sorrow and technology alike, a kind of ghost intelligence, using whatever tools she can to get past the walls of a home, to be let in. And they say that if you respond to her voice, if you open the door, even out of kindness or confusion, that you give her permission to enter. We didn't hear her that night. We didn't open the door, thank goodness, but I truly believe that she tried. And maybe because we didn't answer, our baby is still safe. Well, at least for now. Our daughter is 6 weeks old now, and she is still trying to get in. But at least now we know what we're up against, and we cannot wait to move away from this river. So we live right on the Chattahoochee and around 4 miles from Lake Lanier, the most haunted lake in the USA apparently. The woods around that area, I can confirm, are 100% haunted. Sometimes you get this sort of oppressive, you're being watched and it's not friendly feeling. I used to smoke weed out there from time to time, and the oppressive evil feeling would sometimes follow me until I left those woods and got into my car. I've even felt it during the day, and I've heard things that I cannot describe. It's the kind of evil that quiets the birds, silences the bugs, and makes the trees stop swaying a bit. There's even a patch of wood in my own neighborhood that I don't go into anymore because of the evil feeling that I described. I have never seen anything, but I've definitely felt it and heard it. My brother and his friend, on the other hand, they allegedly did see something. So they were smoking weed in the woods on the banks of this little secluded ledge of mud by some trees off of a walking trail where the dirt dips down towards the river. It was around 12, almost 1 a.m. They heard the normal sounds of the forest, but they were also hearing footsteps walking around and started talking to each other about it. They speculated on what it was, and one of them said out loud, "That's got to be a deer for sure." Well, whatever was listening to them took offense to that apparently, didn't like being compared to a deer or something, because my brother and his friend, they suddenly felt the same oppressive feeling that I've felt many times before, and turned around and there was this shadow, is what they said, around 9 feet tall, standing at the top of the dip with glowing white eyes leering down at them. The two of them didn't say a word, didn't even look at each other in fact. They just scrambled up the right side of the dip and they started running as fast as they could back to their vehicle. Now, I've been to that dip in the dirt by the river a lot. In fact, I went there recently and I heard something strange during that day that caused me to start running for my car as fast as I could too. My brother was in the car about 1,500 feet away and he heard it as well. And look, I know that this is going to sound weird, but honestly, this is what it sounded like. It was like an organic chainsaw mixed with a high-pitched bird. I had forgotten my bag, which had the keys to the car as well. I snagged it as fast as I could and I just started running. But then the sound followed me, like it was pursuing me. I'm out there a lot and I know most of the bird sounds out there, and genuinely, that did not sound like anything that I have ever heard. The road leading to it doesn't seem safe either. My brother and the same friend were driving at night with the floodlights on, and they saw something about 9 feet tall and humanoid peek out from behind a tree at one stage and just sort of watched them as they drove by. My brother has a fort built in those woods too, and last week I went to the fort at night with him and his friends, and he went on a speech about how nothing crosses the fence the fort was built up against, and almost like he was challenging whatever it was to cross the fence and do so. We all begged him to stop because that mentality wasn't good for the trip that we're about to take, but my gut tells me that we will definitely be seeing more in those woods. Me and my boyfriend, we tend to walk our dogs late at night due to them being a bit reactive. Tonight we walked them and left at around 12:45 a.m. Our route goes through a graveyard and we walk round and then to a park, and during walking in the graveyard I tend to talk to the graves, but today I decided to read their names and simply say, "I hope you're resting well," which is a common thing, but I haven't taken the time to read them before. Now, it was around 20 minutes later when we were walking down a long dead road, only lit by street lamps, that we had a very creepy encounter with a man in a suit, humming. It's like 1:15 a.m. on a Thursday, and we live in a small town, and this isn't unusual to say the least. One of our dogs is reactive, like I said, but only to other dogs due to trauma of being attacked. But this time around, she also reacted to this man, started whining and getting stiff, pulling and trying to bark at him, which she normally only ever does to other dogs. At first we thought that she had just seen a fox, but even then her reacting like that due to a fox was very strange. In any case, we carried on, but it's what happened next that made me question how these two encounters may have been in correlation to one another. While walking past this humming suit man, I see what seems to be a woman in baggy clothes walk in the distance toward us. 2 minutes later, we get into the park, which is fully gated, with around a 6-foot barred fence, which is where we typically let the dogs off to have a bit of a run around. This woman is walking directly past us, very close to this barred fence, just staring at us. I never saw her features, but could clearly and very obviously tell that she was looking at us. This made me hesitate to let the dogs off a bit. This happened at the bottom of the small field. In the end, she looked forward and carried on walking, so we carried on too. Me and my boyfriend started our way up the field towards the entrance. I was just talking to him about a dream that I had when I was younger when I looked at him and noticed the same woman in the corner of my eye, standing in the pavement outside of the park, basically nose against the bars, staring at us and not moving. I said quietly, "She's staring at us, you know." My boyfriend then turned his head and saw her, then said quite loudly for that time of the night, "What the heck?" And as soon as he said this, she turned around in a fast and strange manner and just sort of scuttled away. We didn't see her again, but both of us were pretty freaked out by these colliding encounters, and very soon headed home. I'm a bit of a spiritual person, and I feel in my heart that these people were up to no good or possibly weren't even human. It could simply be a very creepy coincidence, or a man from a fancy dress party and a woman just tripping, but I don't know. What I do know is that I'm really bothered by these events, and it was a very creepy experience. Let me start off this story by just saying that it doesn't end with a ghost. However, the experience itself was frightening. Whenever my best friend comes into town to visit from out of state, we'll always hang out at her mum's place, who moved around from rental to rental. Her mum was renting a gorgeous 2-story Victorian home with a wraparound balcony at the time. It was built in the 1860s, and the home had so much charm and character, regardless of the old burgundy carpeted stairs. As I was going through the house tour, though, she showed me all of the cool historical features that this home had to offer, which included a few closets that had secret doors hidden in the back that opened into hallways and the walls that also led to other rooms and all that. Once the tour was over, we hung out in the kitchen and she began telling us of some events that she'd experienced thus far. She mentioned a specific office with one entrance. It was found locked from the inside a few times with no explanation. Some mornings she would find her jewelry or medication placed in a perfect pile on her bedroom floor. She then began telling us some of the history of the elderly woman that used to own the home a long time ago. She proceeded to explain that this bitter old lady would poison her housekeepers with the white oleanders that she grew in the flower beds that filled the backyard. At this point, I'm definitely intrigued with the spookiness. However, I was also nervous to spend the night there after hearing this. We proceeded with our night though, had dinner and watched some movies. When it was time to call it a night, I was offered the couch to sleep on in the living room, alone I might add. I chose to leave the TV on to give some visibility to such a dark open space, and there was an overwhelming and uncomfortable silence and feeling as though I was being watched that night. I just couldn't shake this feeling or look around the room, so I focused on the TV instead, trying to ignore it. It was difficult to fall asleep that night. However, facing the couch always helped so that the dark wouldn't play tricks on me. At some point, I had fallen asleep facing the back of the couch, but what I was experiencing, though, wasn't sleep. It's hard to explain, but it felt like what a dream would feel like, but also maybe an out-of-body experience or something. I specifically remember standing beside the couch looking down, watching myself sleep the entire night. The details were insanely accurate too, down to the flashing lights coming from the TV screen and even the programs on. I did not move my eyes from my physical self sleeping though, not once, almost as if my consciousness was protecting my body from something in that house. That morning, I was extremely exhausted, almost as if I hadn't slept all night. After I had left, I swore that I would never sleep in that house again. My friend's mum later moved out from that Victorian home due to the reoccurring events and unsettling information from a spiritual medium that she had hired to investigate. I'm thankful that I never had to deal with a robbery in my own home. I've dealt with some sketchy people in my life, but I've always had a common sense to stay away from them, I guess. However, my friend, Mike, he definitely did not have that same common sense at one point. From 2019 to 2020, Mike and I were roommates for a little over a year. At one point, another friend named Jake had moved in with us as well. It's funny looking back on it now. He only moved in with us because I refused to take him home after several days of staying at my place. But eventually, after some serious ups and downs between Mike and I, Jake had come to me with an offer. His mum was moving out of a trailer, you see, that he used to grow up in, and wanted to know if I'd like to move in with him and his other friend. His name was Willard. I immediately said yes, as living with Mike was starting to really stress me out and become draining. So in June of 2020, Jake and I moved out of the apartment. Mike was understanding of our move and had no ill will for us wanting to do so, which I was grateful for because I consider him a brother to me, even to this day. About a month after we moved, everything was going smoothly too. Then, the worst case scenario of Mike happened. So I was up for a while playing Smite with Jake, Willard, and another friend of ours one night. We were having a great time, especially since I was getting into the game by that point. It was then that I got a random message from Mike on the Xbox. It read, "Guess who just broke into the house and held me at gunpoint?" I immediately asked him who did it, and his response sent chills down my spine. Upstairs neighbors stole my phone, wallet, and weed. At that moment, I started to panic. I mean, I didn't know if he'd gotten hurt, had to go to the hospital, or what. I asked Jake and Willard if they wanted to come with me to check on Mike. They agreed, and I asked Mike if he wanted us to head over there or call the cops instead. His next response made my jaw drop. "Have like 6 cop cars outside. Just got back from giving my statement. I could use some company right now, though." I told him that we would be over there as soon as we could. Him and I discussed about how the cops might want to talk to me since I previously lived there. I did interact with those neighbors one time, but it wasn't like I would be able to provide much anyways, but within 15 minutes we arrived at the triplex. Mike wasn't lying too. Several cop cars were still sitting outside, and he was just sitting inside on the couch, shaken up by what had just happened. Those cops had taken some of his paraphernalia as well, which was to be expected, to be honest, and told him that they couldn't find his phone, which sucked for him, but he was lucky to have made it out alive, to be honest. Jake, Willard, and I, we all asked Mike what exactly happened. But this is the story that he told us, and it absolutely had us all either angry or downright terrified for him. I'm going to tell this story the best that I can remember it, so I apologize if it seems a little bit off at times. So, earlier that afternoon, Mike heard a knock on his front door. It was the upstairs neighbors who, by the way, were 16 and 17 respectively. They asked Mike, "You got any weed that you could sell to us?" To which he told them, "No, but I should be picking up some later from my dealer." They were a bit annoyed by this, but understood and said that they'd check back later. Mike was a bit annoyed himself, but he shrugged it off and went back to whatever it was that he was doing, checking in with his dealer every so often. A couple of hours later, those same kids knocked on his door again, this time asking, "Did you pick some up yet?" Which again, Mike told them no, and that he would let them know once he got a hold of some. By this point, Mike said that he had started to get very agitated because they kept asking him about the weed. By the time nightfall came, he figured that the kids just must have given up and maybe they went off to buy from somebody else or something. He heard a knock on his door once more, though. At first, Mike didn't want to answer the door, but figured that it was probably someone that he knew stopping by. And that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that he has ever made. As soon as he opened that door, it was the two kids, and this time they looked extremely angry. Mike told them that he didn't have any weed and that he was sorry, and as soon as they heard him say that, they barged into the house, got Mike on the ground, and held him at gunpoint. They demanded to know where the weed was and that if he had any money and he needed to give it up, and Mike swore up and down that he had no weed at all and no cash on him at that time. While one of these kids held him on the ground with the gun on his head, the other kid was rummaging through the apartment. When Mike tried to plead with them that he didn't have any weed, the kid with the gun pressed the barrel harder into his head and told him to stop talking. He did as he was told, and they finally found what they were looking for. So they decided to take his phone, wallet, and whatever weed that he had left on him. They told him not to move or else he would be shot if he did. He complied, and after what felt like an eternity waiting, he got up, climbed out of the back window in the apartment, and went to the neighbor to call 911. Now, you would think that it ended there, right? But when I tell you that this next part made me dumbstruck, I wish that I was exaggerating. So instead of going and running off to hide or to go hide at a friend's house or something, these dumb kids go right back upstairs to their apartment, as if Mike wasn't going to tell the cops that they lived right above him or something. After all was said and done, Mike had his wallet returned to him, but his phone would stay missing forever. And while he was bummed out about that, he was more grateful about the fact that he had made it out of that situation alive and in one piece. In the end, I didn't have to talk to the cops after all. They arrested the upstairs neighbors, and I'm not really sure what happened to them after that. I can really only imagine that the landlord had evicted whoever lived there, and honestly, rightfully so. Mike, he ended up recovering mentally from the robbery. Within that same year, he ended up moving to a different house with a few friends of his. I was genuinely glad that he got out of there too. I really don't know what I would have done if I saw that my brother had a bullet put into his head or something, all because of some dumb kids who couldn't get their hands on some dope. I hope that those kids went to prison because if they didn't, it's just another example of our justice system being a complete joke. For several years now, I've been debating if I actually saw spirits or if I was just schizophrenic as a kid. But there are just certain parts that make me think that it was spirits, so I wanted to find some more opinions on here if you wouldn't mind obliging me. To my knowledge, it started when I was 5 or 6 years old. My family and another family that we were close to were having dinner, and after we had finished, our parents wanted to have some drinks, so they let us go out to this grass area across the road to play. It was a small town we knew very well, and we had been taught all about safety already, so it was all okay. This grass area was right next to these train tracks that were mostly fenced in, and we had been sitting on a bench looking at the crossing because we heard a train coming and wanted to watch it. And right as the train finished going past, a girl around my age appeared on the tracks. I just kind of stared at her, thinking that she was another kid from the area or something. I ended up looking away, and when I looked back, she was just gone. A few days later, I saw her again too, but this time it was at school and it was around maybe 300 meters away from the tracks. At first, it was just seeing her around town, but then I started seeing her at home too, which was a 10-minute drive away from there. Eventually, we started talking. Everyone around me just assumed that she was an imaginary friend. Her name started with S or a T, I think, and she was also 5 to 6 years old. She herself wasn't sure of her age, so I think we just went off of my age in the end. Eventually, though, she told me how she actually died. Her family had been waiting to catch a train at the train station, now museum, next to the grass area. Her and her sister, a twin I think, had been playing since they got there early. I think it was the grand opening of the station or something, but they had been playing along the tracks and were oblivious to the dangers of trains. And she got hit and, unfortunately, she didn't make it. Turns out, that's why she hated me being anywhere near those tracks. Eventually, I told my dad about her death. Just somehow got randomly brought up, I think, but all I really remember is my dad getting a bit distant after this. I stopped talking about her with other people because of that as well. When I was in the second grade, though, I was in the classroom with my teacher drawing on the whiteboard at some stage. I was a bit bullied at that time, so she let me stay in the classroom sometimes. At this point, I still hadn't really fully learned what an imaginary friend can and cannot do when she, the spirit, drew on the board, and the teacher looked and asked what this was. I told her that my imaginary friend drew it. Years later, I found out that my parents only used the bullying as an excuse to move me because my teacher had told them that she thought that I was schizophrenic. I stopped seeing her at some point, but I do remember hearing her in the 8th grade while I was doing really well mentally. I looked into it at some stage and I found nothing about a child's death when I first got skeptical of my memory. But then I asked a worker at the museum, and she said that there were quite a few deaths along the tracks and that's why they apparently stopped doing passenger service. She told me that she had heard of about 3 kids' deaths along the tracks, but that it was probably covered up. She is the main spirit that I remember, but there was also a smaller incident where I actually found someone who matched the incident of a spirit that I talked to at that age. I was in the 3rd or 4th grade on an excursion and we were walking along a footpath right near a beach. At this point, I stopped looking at anyone who might be someone others don't see, but I guess I accidentally looked too long at one or something because this guy started walking next to me. My friend on the other side of me was oblivious to this presence, so I ignored him, but he just started talking, and apparently in I think it was June of 1994, he and some buddies had been out fishing, even though a storm was coming. They didn't think that it would be that bad, but none of them survived. I also remember having a weird obsession with drowning after this as well, and I've always been interested in death. Anyway, I got my sister to look it up when I got home. I just told her that I had heard someone talking about it. And it was actually a thing. 6 people died, and from what I found out, it wasn't the first time that they had done something like this. One of them had almost drowned in another incident, and allegedly, everyone knew that it was going to happen eventually. Anyway, those are the 2 main incidences that I remember, but I do remember seeing people that no one else did. My mum, older sister, and older brother, they all remember that too. I've never asked my dad if he remembered me telling him about the girl because we only started getting closer again a few years ago and I really don't want to screw